Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. I'm glad you joined me. I hope you're gonna like it. It's a short presentation about Consul Dataplane on Kubernetes. I don't know if you heard about it. It's a very nice thing. It might make your life easier when you deploy a production-ready console on multiple clusters in multiple networks. So that's short overview what we do. Before we get more to the presentation, I will just shortly introduce myself. My name is Norbert Gruszka, and I'm a DevOps engineer at Cloud Native team at Adfinis. And here you can find some contact information if you would like to leave some feedback after this presentation, or you have any question. Do not hesitate, email me, ping me. I will do my best to answer the question. This presentation was done, I'm presenting it, but there was multiple people involved in process here. So I also would like to thank you, everyone who was involved in this presentation, especially Pascal and Kevin from Cloud Native team. And I hope they also will like this presentation. So let's get to it. Cloud Dataplane, Consul Dataplane. I organized this presentation as a sort of a story, because sometimes we see the whole system right away. We just scratch it on the paper, and when we see it, we know exactly what's going on. But sometimes we have to figure it out. So we start with something smaller, we start with some assumptions, and slowly we progress and we go toward our solution. So it's kind of like a journey. And today, during this presentation, I would like to present to you a love story of Service Andrew and Service Barbara. Yes, exactly. So this is a love story. There is some plot twists, etc., etc. But this is, I hope you're gonna like it. So let's introduce our heroes here. This is Service Andrew, and there is a Service Barbara. Both of them were deployed in a private network, and they could communicate freely within this private network. Very nice setup, and no issues at all. But Service Andrew is a kind of complicated guy, and he figured out that he can make a lot of money in a fast way, and it didn't work out. And it was their money, Barbara too. So Service Andrew found himself in a situation that he needs to skip the town because Barbara is after him. And he thought like, okay, I need to do it right. I need to create a setup which is very tough to get to me through this setup, I would say. So he decided that he would move to another private network. And Barbara at first was like, easy peasy. I mean, I'm gonna get you. But then he said like, no, it's the same address space. And also he did some meetings and he moved stuff around, and there's a bunch of firewall rules in between and security protocols. So establishing this connection is not that easy. And it's just a story, but I hope you can see that what we're trying to solve here is the problem that we might have two networks in two different offices, or maybe we have two different data centers, and we want to connect them. We want to connect services, deploy them, and sometimes we might encounter a problem that the address space is the same, or it's overlapping, or maybe there is some firewall rule, or it's just opening bidirectional connection is simply not that easy. Like there are different scenarios. And this is essentially a problem that we try to solve here. So the question is, how can we help Service Barbara to solve her unsolved business with Mr. Service Andrew, who ran away with her money? And yeah, so what can we do? Like the first thing that, for example, comes to my mind is like, okay, maybe I can set up a NAT gateway. So maybe I can get there through this NAT gateway. But obviously we quickly realized that no, it's not even, it's just the beginning of our little story to set up this connection. And we can try to figure it out on our own. Like that's what we do in our day-to-day, let's say, work. But there are solutions out there which might help us. And in that case, I would like to look into HashiCorp Consul. And the question is, what HashiCorp Consul is actually. What is it? Why HashiCorp Consul? So it's a service mesh solution providing service discovery and automated networking. So it sounds like something we want to use, right? It's something, especially because of this automated networking. It allows you to connect multiple clusters. I mean, services deploy on multiple clusters together. It allows you to connect services deployed outside of your Kubernetes cluster. So we get this freedom, like many companies are in the process of migrating to the cloud or in the process of migrating to different infrastructure like Kubernetes, for example. And taking everything at once, it's a big task, but taking service by service sounds like more as a much easier task. And with Consul, you can kind of go that way and keep some services there and deploy some services on the cluster. It also gives you the centralized configuration management using the key vault store. So you can organize your management, the management configuration. I mean, it speaks about itself. So, and also since we're talking about connecting different networks, and sometimes we might be using public network to establish this connection, it's also important. The security is also an important concern, and Consul is also good at that. It enforces TLS encryption and is a component of HashiCorp's Zero Trust security solution. So if you're interested in those topics, that might be the way to go, I would say. And if you talk about Consul, it is the main component which we're going to work with is Consul agent. And what this agent is, it's a long-running daemon on every member of the Consul cluster. So it can be our nodes in the cluster, or this can be a VM outside of the cluster. But in this case, we will focus only on Kubernetes. So on every node, I'm going to run at least one agent, and this agent can run either as a client or as a server, right? And it's up to us how we configure that. And it's going to handle the DNS. It can run DNS or HTTP interface, and it's responsible for running checks and keeping services in sync. So this is the heart of our system, I would say. I mean, spread across, but still. And so since we know that, we can come back to our story and try to implement that somehow. So again, we have our two private networks. We have our VNAT gateways, and we deploy Kubernetes in them because we want to deploy a bunch of stuff. So we're going to use Kubernetes for that. And we have two nodes for each cluster and our service Andrew and service Barbara. And at the point, nothing really changed. They still cannot connect. So the first thing we want to do is to install Consul. Now, obviously, you have many ways you can install Consul. Everything is well documented. In that case, I'm going to use Helm chart, just because I have this command, and deploy my Consul client on each node and Consul server on each cluster. But as you might see already, it also doesn't really change much. I mean, I still cannot really connect from one cluster to the other. I mean, now I have more services to maintain and two clusters. I mean, I kind of missed the point. So what I can do, I can extract the Consul server and put it as a separate control plane. So now I have my third Kubernetes cluster deployed somewhere, let's say, which is going to work as a control plane for my two clusters with my business application, for example. And it might look that maybe it will work. And just long story short, to make it work, I need to be able to set up a connection between Consul server and Consul client. And it must be bidirectional communication. And in that case, I can call my server because let's say it's available under some public domain, or I made it available to this pod. But because of this NAT gateway in this particular scenario, I cannot really establish this connection. So it might look like it's not the way to go, right? And with this classic console deployment, when I need to have my client and server and they need to talk to each other constantly, you might be right. It's not going to work simply. And luckily, the HashiCorp recently introduced this Dataplane deployment that you can deploy console as the Dataplane. And what is all about? So we're going to remove our console client and replace them with a sidecar container in our pod to each service. And this console agent, the biggest difference here, I mean, in this context, obviously, because we try to establish connection between server and our service, the biggest difference here is that I don't need this bidirectional communication. All I need to be able to call my server from the agent, but not the other way around, which kind of simplifies stuff, right? Because now in this environment with multiple firewall rules and different security protocols, all I need to worry about is how I can reach the server, and I don't need to expose my cluster directly. So I can even remove this NAT gateway. It's no longer needed. It was just some false trail I wanted to follow, but it doesn't make sense anymore. And it seems like it's going to work this time. So Barbara can finally get her money back. I mean, I feel so excited. And we worked so hard. Here's the reward. But after we deployed that, we faced some issues with gossip. And I'm going to get more into that. I just present you the solution that it was, we simply deployed two control planes and set up a peering between them. And that way we solved this issue that we could deploy services in the same namespace in the cluster. And that'll be most of it. Just a short comment. So at this point, Barbara can get to Andrew, and Andrew has not easy way to hide. It's very tough for him to hide. So I hope best for them. We're gonna leave them at this point, and let's hope this relation will survive, or at least Andrew will survive. And one last comment, that because you can see that we have four independent components here. We have our we have our control plane and our cluster, which hosts the service or the business application. And each one of them can be deployed in a different environment. And for example, here we can have two managed consoles on HashiCorp cloud platform. And one of our clusters can be in the cloud, like Amazon, Azure. We have many providers to choose from. And the other one can be on-prem. So as I mentioned before, this model gives you a lot of flexibility, in case where you want to deploy your stuff and how you want to connect the stuff. Obviously, there are some limitations, not like ultimate model, but it's very flexible. It's very flexible. And I would like to also show you how it looks like. We prepared a small demo containing of 4 clusters as well. It's like a mini version of what we did for one of our clients. And we deployed this demo application you can find here. So I will switch to, first to show you this application, that this is just a simple application containing front end and back end. And what we did, so let's start from bottom up. We deployed 2 clusters on Exascale, which are going to host our business application. So in case that would be those 2. And we deployed them on Exascale. Exascale provides a very nice service called SKS, it's managed cluster. And you also get a module, which also allows you to deploy it in a very nice fashion. As you can see, it doesn't take too much space even. So this is those are our 2 clusters, and on them we deployed our application. I mean, not our those applications from HashiCorp. And The only difference we made is that we split frontend from backend. So frontend is on one cluster and the other one, and the backend is on the other one. So one exascale cluster has the frontend, the other one has the backend. And as you can see, those are just normal deployments, normal services, nothing very fancy. But it's good. That is the way it should be. So this is our application, and now we can get to the HashiCorp cloud. So here I have my two managed clusters. Here's a little bit more details about it. So this is my first managed cluster, which maintains the front end, I would say, the cluster which holds the front end. And this is the second control plane, which controls a cluster with a backend. So this is my first control plane, controlling my front-end application deployed here, and my second control plane, controlling backend application deployed there. And both of those clusters are on Exascale. And those two are on AWS. So you can see that I can use two cloud providers to back up this infrastructure, this project. And as you can see, I immediately have access to all the services. And thanks to the so this is my terminal. One window is for one cluster, so we can get services. So you can see here is my cluster with front end, and here's my cluster with the backend. And we can see that if the data plane is in place by inspecting the pod, for example, this one. Obviously, we get a bunch of annotation, and we already can see connect index status and etc. and so forth. But if you scroll down, we see the init container, bunch of stuff, and also where are you? Where are you? I had to miss it. Here. So containers, and you can clearly see that there is my main container engine, and there is my Consul Dataplane container. So everything as should. And as you can see, I didn't have to modify my deployment anyhow. This container gets injected into this pod. So how the demo looks like, how this application looks like, and this will be a very good question. How does application actually look like? To do so, I need to port forward stuff here and then switch. And this is my application. I'm going to refresh it a few times, and I get those caps from the backend. And for example, let's say that I want to show that actually this connection exists between those two clusters. I will head off to my backend cluster and describe, actually no, I want to inspect logs for payments because they are quite clear. It's easy to spot if something changed. And I'm going to buy a coffee. I mean, I did a hard work today. I deserve a coffee, I believe. So I will go for Volate, why not? Add it to a cart, checkout, and provide some information like HashiTalks demo. Pay now. Paid, and I can see that something happened. So I'm actually using this front end from one cluster is using the backend from the other one. And obviously, the one missing point I didn't mention is that to make it work, we had to set up this peering, as I mentioned before. And in this peering, we had to import services from the other cluster. And maybe that would be an interesting note to add. Okay, so this is the end of the story. I hope you liked it. I hope it was interesting to you. And maybe you even try Consul in your organization. Maybe you find a use case for it already. And so I would like to thank you for joining me. I hope you find many other interesting interesting talks today during HashiTalk, and I wish you a great day and see you around. Bye.